G'day folks, welcome to part 2 of how to install a solar panel onto your four-wheel drive. In this part I'm going to show you how to actually mount the solar panel and how to do the electrical wiring. So let's get stuck into it. Okay, so we've taken the previous solar panel off the car. Now before we mount this on the car, we've got these two leads. Now one of them is positive, one of them is negative. This one is negative, this one's a positive one. Now these connectors on the end, we don't need these. We're going to cut these off, but we're going to make sure we know which ones are positive. Now this one's labelled, but what I like to do is I like to get a bit of red electrical tape and just wrap it around so we know that at a glance from a distance we know that that one is the positive. So what we're going to do is we're going to chop these ends off as close to the plug as possible because we won't be using these plugs again. So we'll cut that off, and the other one as well. Normally if I'm cutting off say an electrical lead with a 240 volt wall plug on the end, I don't want to cut right at the end. I'd like to cut as far away from the end as possible because you can reuse those bits. You can always just strip the cable back and attach it to something else. So, but in this case, I'm not going to be using these plugs, so we'll cut right at the plug. So we want to end up with two long leads, and I'll show you now how to mount it to your tent. Okay, so now it's the same procedure as before. We'll turn this over and we'll put nice big blobs of glue in the center of each one of these cells on the reverse side, and we'll do the perimeter, and then we'll go and put it onto the tent. So you can see from the previous application, you can see where the blobs of glue were. So we're just going to follow the same pattern and put the glue in the same place. Give it a bit of a clean first. Make sure that there's no dust on there. The cleaner it is, the better. Okay, that's looking okay. Right. There's nothing wrong with having nice big dollops of glue. This will get squashed flat when you put the panel on and weigh it down. And as you saw when I was taking the previous panel off, the Sealant does a really good job of holding the panel down, but you can remove it fairly easily. And then the sealant itself you can remove from the surface with a screwdriver or some other flat implement. So nice big dollops of glue. Okay, now we go around the edge. You can hold your finger along the edge to steady yourself a bit as you do this, and I found that that helps quite a lot. So all we're hoping to achieve is to not get any water underneath this panel once it's on the car. Not that water is going to do anything bad to your tent, because it's made, if it's an Alu-Cab tent or a hard shell rooftop tent that's made from aluminium, as we know, aluminium doesn't rust. So having water, a little bit of water under here won't do much harm, but We want to avoid it if we can. That's the end of that. So close. We've run out at the last second, but that's okay because I have another one. So that's just another thing to keep in mind before you start any project. Think through what you might need. Make sure you've got everything. There's nothing worse than having to run out and right in the middle of the project drop everything and run off to buy something that you've forgotten about or didn't realize you had. So it's always a good idea to plan in advance and make sure you've got everything. And often I'm working on something on a Sunday night when there's no shops open. So here we go, finishing this off. Just make sure that we get glue all the way around. Right, now just because why not, we'll just go down the center. And probably don't need it everywhere, but I think it's better to be safe than sorry. Last thing you want is your precious solar panel flying off the roof of your car when you're doing 100 k's down the freeway. The other thing is this silicone is extremely sticky and very, very difficult to get off your hands. So if at all possible, try not to get it on your hands. I know before I use my fingers to put this around the edge. If I can find some gloves next time, I'm going to use some gloves to do that because yeah, it was quite difficult to wash it off my hands. Right, so that looks good, and now we need to work fairly fast because this stuff does set pretty quickly. So now let's go out and put it on the car. So we need to try and get it as close to the center as we can. That's about right. You need to be a bit careful because these are solar cells, you don't want to damage them. Okay, so that took a fair bit of effort, but it is now securely tied down until the silicone sealant sets. Okay, so the panel is now in place, and the next thing to do is the electrical wiring. So the next thing we need to do is drill some holes in the tent for the cables to go through. Now the good thing about Alu-Cab tents is the internal fabric of the tent is recessed from the outer edge. So as you can see, the gas struts are internal. You have all this space to play with. You need to get some of these things. These are called glands, and it's essentially a way of running cables through a material, and it has a rubber seal on the inside and it will make it watertight. So let's fit that. So I've already got holes from last time, and these need to be measured precisely to the same diameter as this is. Okay, so this is the final result. You don't want to make these too tight, so there needs to be a little bit of flex there, but then these need to be very, very tightly done up. Make sure there's no water getting through there. So this is just a larger version of the gland that we have on top of the tent. And we've drilled a hole, inserted the gland, and now we're going to run the cables through to the back of the tent where we have an Anderson plug. So what we need to think about is how are these cables going to behave when the tent opens and closes. We don't want to put any tension on the cables, but we also need to make sure that the cables are protected and they're out of the way. So the best way of doing that is to have the cables coiled like that, so that when the tent opens and closes, there's as little movement as possible in the cable. Now the other thing we're going to do is we're going to put the cable in through, we're going to run it through one of these corrugated plastic tubings to protect it and cable tie that. So I'll show you the result of that in just a minute. Okay, so now we've run the cables through the top of the tent and through this corrugated tubing into the base of the tent. Now we've got this loop so that when the tent opens and closes, it doesn't put too much flex and stress on the cable. So the location where you drill the hole is entirely dependent on this loop. So that needs to be in more or less the right place. And the other thing is you can see this dust mark. So anything on the inside of this dust mark is inside the tent. Anything on the outside, this is where the rubber seal sits. So the rubber seal sits right there. So that's outside, that's inside, and that's the seal. So anything internal to that is you can drill anywhere in there. So that's the good thing about Alu-Cab tents. So now let's go and try closing the tent and see how this loop behaves. See, I'm not very happy with how that's going. No, that needs to be adjusted. Okay, so this was a bit of trial and error. I finally got the cables going through these glands into the roof panel, and from there it's going through this corrugated conduit into the base of the tent. So this is making a loop to minimize the flex on the cable when the lid is opened and closed. Now the hard part was getting this loop to be the right size. If it's too small or too large, it either all falls out the side or just gets squashed somewhere. So this seems to be about the right size. So when I go and close the tent, the strap gets put up there so that you can close it. And you can see that the strap is still holding the loop of cable down there. So when I pull the tent closed, see how it pulls it in? Clears very nicely. So over time that will assume that position, and that will then settle down into a specific shape, and that's basically it. Okay, so I'm now sitting inside my tent and we're on the home stretch. This is the cable that's coming from the solar panel, and I need to now attach an Anderson plug to the end of it. So for anyone that's not familiar, this is what an Anderson plug looks like, and it has a positive and a negative end, and the cable essentially goes in that side, and then you attach this to another Anderson plug and they just slot together. So let's get to it. So the first thing we need to do is crimp these little lugs onto the end of the cable. So let's go and strip the cable. So we'll need probably this much of the cable. So we only need to strip a little bit off the end, that much. Now at this point, we need to be very careful because that solar panel is live. It's generating current as we speak, so we don't want to strip both at the same time in case they touch and we short out something. So we put on the lug, and then we get our crimping tool. So there we have a very nicely crimped lug on the end of our cable. Now we can do the other side. Actually no, it's probably better to put this into the Anderson plug. That way it's nice and safe. So this is the negative. You can see that on the Anderson plug we have the positive and the negative side. Now these lugs have on the bottom they're flat, and on the top they have this little ridge near the tip. So they go in that direction. So this is the top of the Anderson plug, and so they go in this direction. So we essentially slide it in, and there's a little clip, and as we push it in until we hear a click, there we go. So that, I don't know if you can see that, but that is now securely in. And now we can do the other cable. So let's strip the end of it. Only need a little bit. It's a perfect amount. We'll get our crimping tool, put it on the end. Oops. Put it on the end, and there we go, that's nice and secure. So then we put the positive lead in, making sure that the flat bottom part of it is facing down, and push it in. There we go. So now we have our positive and our negative, and that is nice and secure. Now I already have another cable with an Anderson plug on the end of it, and this is now simply running to the other end of the tent, and it is going out the base of the tent. It's going out the base of the tent to an Anderson plug on the outside, which is then going off to my battery. So let's plug it in, and we should have power. So this is the Anderson plug where the cable comes out of the tent and goes to my secondary battery. So I've got a voltmeter here, and I'm going to have a look at the voltage, and we should be getting about 18 volts if it's working. So negative, positive, 18.53 volts. So that's looking fantastic. So we've finally made it to the end of the video. I now have a brand new, fully functioning solar panel installed onto my rooftop tent, and it's working really, really well. One thing I failed to mention is the solar panel can't be plugged directly into a battery. It needs to go via a voltage regulator or a solar charger. So I have a Redarc 1240D, which has a solar input, and that then is connected to my secondary battery, and it basically makes sure that the current that's coming from the solar panel is nice and evened out before it hits the battery. So if you've made it this far, thank you very much for watching. I really appreciate you sticking with me for this long. It's been a long video. I hope that this video was of use to you. It's been fun to make, and if you have requests for any other videos on any topic you're interested in, let me know, drop it in the comments. Or if you have comments about this particular video, once again, drop it in the comments. I love reading and replying to your comments. And like I always say at the end of these videos, like, subscribe and comment. So thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next video. Take care. Bye-bye.